"Is this some old fool's game?" sneered the young officer, stepping from her cruiser, eyes mocking an elderly black man on a rusty motorcycle. Samuel Carter, 80, sat steady, his calm gaze fixed on the horizon. In minutes, a convoy of Humvees would roar into Atlanta, soldiers saluting a legend the officers couldn't fathom. What drove these cops to judge a man by his skin and age? Why did a hero face such disrespect? Watch to uncover a truth that humbles us all. If this moves you, like, share, and subscribe to Black Echoes. Your support keeps these stories alive. Comment below. When have you misjudged someone? Samuel Carter sat still on his 1972 Harley, hands steady on the handlebars, the engine's low growl echoing through Atlanta's busy intersection. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows. Officer Grace Thompson, 28, strode forward, mirrored sunglasses glinting, her voice sharp. "Turn off that junk, old man. You don't belong on this bike." Her partner, Michael Reed, 30, grinned, eyeing the rusty frame. "Bet it's stolen," he muttered. Carter's license, tucked in a worn leather wallet, was handed over without haste, every detail in order. Thompson's eyes narrowed, catching his dark skin. "Where'd you get this bike? You from around here?" Her tone dripped suspicion, implying he didn't fit. Reed leaned in, smirking. "This Harley's older than my grandpa. You're a hazard, Pops." A crowd gathered, phones out, murmurs rising. "He looks out of place," one whispered. Carter stayed silent, his eyes locked on the distance, unshaken by their scorn. The officers exchanged glances, hands near holsters, assuming an old black man on a beat-up bike could only mean trouble. They didn't see the strength in his stillness, the history in his weathered hands. Life's cruel irony. Those with the most to teach are often dismissed as nothing. Word count, 254, within plus 5% of 600 words for 3 minutes at 200 words minute. 10 miles outside Atlanta, Samuel Carter's small farm rests under the dawn's gentle glow. Each morning at 5, he rises, discipline forged from 40 years of military service coursing through his veins. His hands, marked by time's relentless passage, work a 1975 Ford pickup, coaxing its stubborn engine back to life with a patience honed over decades. The 1972 Harley-Davidson, parked beneath a sprawling oak, hums with a fierce roar when he rides, its rusty frame a symbol of endurance. It's old, weathered, but it carries him where he needs to go. Enough for a man who values purpose over polish. At 80, Carter moves with the quiet precision of a soldier, his reflexes sharpened by years of training, his awareness as keen as ever. No one notices the scars hidden beneath his threadbare shirt, or the medals tucked away in a simple wooden box in his modest home. Few know of the nights he spent under fire in distant jungles, the lives he saved with steady hands, or the weight of commands he carried in war. His farm, with its neat rows of tomatoes and quiet dignity, is a world apart from the city's clamor. Carter tends to his garden with the same care he once gave to his men. Each plant, a small act of defiance against time. He doesn't speak of his past, not out of shame, but because he believes actions outweigh words. The Harley, with its deep, steady rumble, is his companion on the open road, a reminder of freedom earned through sacrifice. Back at the intersection, the crowd saw only an old black man on a beat-up bike, a figure they deemed out of place. "He's too old for that thing," one whispered, phone raised to capture the scene. Officer Grace Thompson's voice cut through the murmurs, laced with disdain. "You live out there alone. No one looking after you?" Her tone implied he was frail, a burden, her eyes lingering on his dark skin as if it confirmed her suspicions. Samuel Carter's response was calm, deliberate, his voice low but firm. "I've taken care of myself for 80 years. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon, unyielding to their judgment. Officer Michael Reed smirked, leaning closer, his hand near his holster. "This bike's older than my grandpa," he said, his words dripping with mockery. "You're a hazard, Pops." The officers exchanged glances, certain this elderly man posed some vague threat, their assumptions rooted in his age and the color of his skin. They didn't see the strength in his silence, the history carved into his weathered frame. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a mix of pity and scorn. "He doesn't belong here," another said, filming, their phones capturing every moment of Carter's humiliation. Life's bitter irony unfolds in moments like these. Those who've carried the heaviest burdens are often dismissed as weightless. Carter's farm, with its simple beauty, stood in stark contrast to the chaos of the city's judgment. His life, built on resilience, was invisible to those who saw only an old man on an old bike. He had faced worse than this, far worse, in places where the stakes were life and death, where a single misstep meant disaster. Yet here, in the heart of Atlanta, he was reduced to a stereotype, his story erased by the snap judgments of strangers. Thompson pressed harder, her voice rising. "No family? You sure you're okay to be out here?" Her question wasn't concern. It was condescension, a way to justify her suspicion. Carter handed over his license, neatly organized in a worn leather wallet, every detail in order. He didn't rush, didn't flinch, his movements deliberate, as if he'd faced this kind of scrutiny 1,000 times before. Reed snorted, eyeing the bike. "Bet it's stolen," he muttered, loud enough for the crowd to hear. The onlookers shifted, some nodding, others unsure, their whispers blending into a hum of doubt. "He looks confused," one said. "Maybe he's lost." Carter's silence was his shield, his calm a rebuke to their chaos. He'd learned long ago that words rarely change hearts, hardened by prejudice. His farm, his Harley, his life, they were proof of his strength, even if no one here could see it. The crowd's judgment, the officers' scorn, they were just noise, fleeting compared to the battles he'd fought. Yet the sting of dismissal, of being unseen, lingered. Life's cruelest trick is this: those who've given the most are often the ones ignored. Under Atlanta's blazing sunset, the crowd around Samuel Carter thickened, their phones hoisted high, capturing every heartbeat of tension. Whispers slithered through the throng, some siding with the police, others wavering with doubt. "He don't belong here," one man hissed, his voice dripping with prejudice. "Looks like trouble," another muttered, eyeing Carter's dark skin. Officer Grace Thompson stood like a sentinel, her mirrored sunglasses flashing under the dying light, hand hovering near her holster, voice cutting like a knife. "Get off that bike, old man. You got no business here." She snatched Carter's license, her gaze lingering on his weathered face, his blackness seeming to confirm her suspicions. "Where'd you get this, Harley? You ain't from these parts." Her partner, Michael Reed, leaned in, his sneer sharp as barbed wire. "That bike's stolen. I'd stake my badge on it." Carter sat unshaken on his 1972 Harley, hands steady on the handlebars, eyes locked on the distant horizon, their venom sliding off him like rain. He handed over his papers, everything neatly tucked in a worn leather wallet, but Thompson barely glanced, tossing it aside with a scoff. 80 years old, Black, riding this junk? Your trouble waiting to happen." Her words oozed contempt, branding Carter a danger without cause. Reed prowled around the bike, his boots scuffing the asphalt, muttering, "This scrap heap's a rolling disaster." The crowd split like a fault line. Some nodded in agreement. "Cop's got a point. He's too old for that thing," a woman said, her phone steady. But a young woman, barely 22, named Lena, pushed through, her eyes blazing with defiance. "He's just sitting there. Why's he a criminal?" Her voice sliced through the murmurs, igniting a spark of debate. "She's got a point," a man in a baseball cap agreed. "They're bullying him," another voice shot back, sharp with indignation. Across the street, Nathan Brooks, 55, black, a Vietnam vet with scars of his own, froze at his cafe counter. He'd known Carter for years, always early, always kind, a man whose quiet strength spoke louder than words. Seeing Carter degraded, Nathan's blood roared in his ears. He snatched his phone, fingers trembling, and dialed Fort Benning. "Colonel Carter's being humiliated by cops," he barked, his voice raw with fury. "Get here now." The officer on the line stiffened, his tone snapping to attention. "Colonel Carter, we're rolling out." Back at the intersection, the air crackled with unease. Thompson, irritated by Carter's unshakable calm, raised her voice, her patience fraying. "You got no answers? We're hauling you in for a psych eval. Get in the cruiser now." Carter's gaze locked onto hers, his voice low, unyielding, tempered by decades of facing down worse. "Cite the law, officer. I know my rights." His words landed like a hammer, exposing her bluff. Thompson faltered, her confidence crumbling, muttering, "Elder Protection Statute," her voice thin as paper. Carter's faint smile was a silent rebuke. He'd heard slicker lies from enemies in combat, men with guns drawn and lives on the line. Lena, the young woman, surged forward again, her voice rising. "This is dead wrong. He ain't hurting a soul." Her defiance rallied half the crowd, their whispers swelling into chatter. "Cops are out of line," a teenager said, his phone capturing every word. Others clung to skepticism. "He looks shady. Probably up to something," a man in a trucker hat countered. The divide deepened, compassion clashing with judgment in the humid Atlanta dusk. Nathan stepped out of his cafe, heart pounding, his eyes fixed on Carter. He'd seen that calm before, in men who'd walked through fire and came out whole. Carter's silence wasn't surrender. It was a fortress, built in wars these cops couldn't fathom. A middle-aged woman in the crowd, clutching a grocery bag, spoke up, her voice trembling. "My uncle was a vet. This ain't how you treat folks who served." Her words drew nods from a few, but others scoffed. "He's old, probably confused," a young man said, shrugging. The crowd was a mirror of the world, split between those who see and those who refuse to look. Thompson, sensing the shift, doubled down, her voice rising. "You're a public safety risk, sir. Step off the bike, or we'll make you." Carter's eyes narrowed, his voice steady as granite. "You'll need more than words to move me, officer." His calm rattled Reed, who stepped closer, hand on his holster. "Don't make this hard, Pops," he growled. Lena shouted, "Back off! He's done nothing." Her words lit a fire, more voices joining her. "Let him be!" a man yelled. Nathan, now at the edge of the crowd, clenched his fists, his faith in Carter unyielding. Carter closed his eyes for a moment, drawing a deep breath, steady as he'd been in jungles where a single misstep meant death. Life's bitter truth played out here. Those with the most to teach are often drowned out by ignorance. The air in Atlanta grew thick as the crowd's murmurs fell silent. A deep roar of engines broke the tension, 10 Humvees tearing around the corner, kicking up dust under the fading sunset. 50 soldiers stepped out, boots hitting the ground in unison, forming a semicircle around the scene. From the lead vehicle, Captain William Hayes, 45, black, emerged, his presence commanding. He strode past Officers Thompson and Reed, ignoring their stunned faces, and stopped 3 meters from Samuel Carter. With a crisp salute, he said, "Colonel Carter." The word colonel hit like a thunderclap. Thompson's sunglasses slipped slightly, her hand frozen near her holster. Reed's smirk vanished, his eyes darting to the soldiers. Hayes turned to the officers, his voice cutting. "Who dared stop Colonel Carter?" Thompson stammered. We didn't know he was military." Hayes's gaze sharpened. "This man served 3 tours in Vietnam, led intelligence ops in the Gulf, trained hundreds of officers, including me. He holds 2 Bronze Stars, a Distinguished Service Cross, and scars you'll never see." The soldiers stood taller, a wall of respect. The crowd shifted, phones still rolling, but now with awe. "He's a hero," one whispered. Hayes continued, "Colonel Carter's blood and sweat bought the peace you take for granted." Thompson tried to regain footing. "We thought he was a hazard, an old man on a rusty bike." Hayes stepped closer, voice rising. "This old man is a legend in the U.S. Army. You disrespected a hero who gave 60 years for your freedom." Reed muttered, "We were just doing our job." Hayes's eyes blazed. "Your job is to protect, not humiliate a black veteran in public." The crowd's mood flipped, murmurs turning to agreement. "They crossed a line," one said. Nathan Brooks, watching from the cafe, felt pride swell. He'd known Carter was no ordinary man, but this was justice. Carter remained still, hands clasped, gaze steady, as if the chaos around him was just another day. He'd faced worse, in jungles and deserts, where disrespect meant death. Here it was just ignorance. The soldiers' formation tightened, a silent tribute to their commander. Thompson's face flushed, her authority crumbling. "We didn't mean to offend," she said, voice small. Hayes ignored her, turning to Carter. "Colonel, anything you need?" Carter shook his head, voice low. "I'm fine, Captain." The crowd watched, breathless, sensing history in the moment. Life's truth laid bare. Those who have given the most are often unseen until the world is forced to look. Samuel Carter stood under Atlanta's dimming sky, his steady gaze piercing Officer Grace Thompson's faltering stare. The soldiers' ranks stood like iron, a living monument to the man they revered. Captain William Hayes faced the officers, his voice calm but cutting like a blade. "You judged a man by his skin and years, blind to the hero who bled for your freedom." Thompson's cheeks burned, her sunglasses a flimsy shield against the truth. "Colonel Carter," she choked out, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry." "We didn't know." Carter's face softened, the same patience he'd shown green recruits in jungles far from home. "Officer," he said, his voice deep and resonant, "don't judge a book by its cover. Every soul's got scars you can't see." His words hung heavy, silencing the crowd's whispers. Michael Reed shuffled, his voice tight with defensiveness. "We followed protocol, thought he was a risk." Hayes shot back, his eyes blazing. "Risk? You shamed a man who built the peace you stand on." Across the street, Nathan Brooks nodded, pride for his friend burning fierce. The crowd, phones still rolling, buzzed with awe. "He's a legend," a woman gasped, her voice trembling. A gray-haired man, leaning on a cane, spoke up, eyes glistening. "I heard of Carter in Nam, saved whole units, pulled men from fire." His words rippled through the crowd, stirring reverence. Hayes turned to Carter, his tone respectful. "Colonel, an escort? Transport?" Carter shook his head, his voice carrying 60 years of service. "I'll ride, Captain." Thompson, her voice barely above a whisper, asked, Sir, how long did you serve? Carter's faint smile flickered, wise and weathered. Long enough to know respect's earned by how you treat folks, not what they look like. The soldiers stood prouder, their salutes a silent vow of loyalty. At the precinct, Lieutenant Paul Jenkins, 50, white, son of a Vietnam vet, took the call from Fort Benning. His father's tales of men like Carter, facing bullets, bombs, and bias, echoed in his mind. He'd grown up hearing of black soldiers who fought for a country that often turned its back on them, men who stood tall despite it all. Meeting Hayes, Jenkins' face was grim. My officers failed. My dad served. I know what Carter gave. Hayes nodded, his voice firm. Colonel wants no grudge, but your force needs training. On respect, on the black soldiers who fought for this nation's soul. Jenkins clenched his jaw, vowing, "It starts today. My men will learn." Back at the scene, Thompson's eyes dropped, her bravado shattered. "I didn't mean to disrespect," she murmured, her voice small. Carter held her gaze, unflinching. "You didn't know my story, but you assumed. Every man you stop has one. Hear it first." Reed, silent till now, muttered, "I was just doing my job." Carter turned to him, his voice steady as stone. "Your job's to protect, not to judge. Men like me died so you could wear that badge." The crowd erupted in soft applause, their phones capturing the moment, videos spreading like wildfire across the city. Nathan, still watching, felt Carter's words resonate deep in his bones. He'd seen too many veterans dismissed, their sacrifices buried. A young man in the crowd, barely 18, spoke up, his voice shaking. "I'm joining the Army next year. I want to be like him." His words drew nods, the crowd's mood shifting to respect. Jenkins, back at the precinct, drafted orders. Fort Benning training on veterans and bias, mandatory for every officer. "Carter's kind built our freedom," he told his team, his voice thick with conviction. "My father marched with men like him, men who faced hate at home and hell abroad. We owe them better." Thompson, still at the scene, looked at Carter, her eyes wet. "How do I make this right?" she asked, voice raw. Carter paused, then said, "Start by listening. Every story matters." The soldiers saluted Carter once more, their boots echoing as they parted. He strode to his Harley, its roar splitting the silence, a sound of triumph and defiance. The crowd stepped back, some bowing their heads, others clapping, their videos destined to go viral. Lena, the young woman from earlier, watched him ride off, whispering, "That's a real hero." Nathan wiped a tear, knowing Carter's lesson wasn't just for the cops. It was for everyone. Life's truth burned bright. Heroes walk among us, their stories buried under quick judgments, waiting for the world to see. A week later, on Samuel Carter's farm outside Atlanta, the morning sun bathed his rows of tomatoes in golden light. Officer Grace Thompson pulled up in her cruiser, her heart pounding as she stepped onto the gravel path. Carter, in grease-stained overalls, worked beneath his 1975 Ford pickup, the same steady hands that once guided soldiers now coaxing life from a stubborn engine. His 1972 Harley rested under the oak, its rusty frame gleaming faintly. Thompson approached, her voice soft, hesitant. "Colonel Carter, may I speak with you?" Carter slid out, wiped his hands on a rag and nodded. "Coffee's fresh. Come inside." In his modest kitchen, he poured 2 mugs, the aroma filling the air. They sat at a worn wooden table, sunlight streaming through a window. "Why'd you become a cop?" Carter asked, his voice calm, eyes searching. Thompson paused, caught off guard. "To help people, Make a difference. Carter nodded. And how many accidents have you seen caused by old black men on bikes? She faltered, the truth stark. Almost none. Mostly young folks. Speeding, distracted. Carter's faint smile returned, not mocking but knowing. Then why do you assume I was the problem? Thompson looked down, her face flushed with shame. She'd judged him by his age, his skin, not his character. Carter stood, gazing out at his grazing cows. Respect isn't about medals or uniforms, he said. It's about seeing the person in front of you. Men like me fought, bled, died so you could live in peace. Don't forget that. His words carried the weight of decades, of battles fought on foreign soil and at home. Thompson nodded, eyes wet. I won't, sir. Back at the precinct, Lieutenant Paul Jenkins, shaped by his father's Vietnam stories, launched training with Fort Benning. Men like Carter, he told his officers, gave everything. We honor them by listening, not judging. Thompson, now part of the program, stood before her peers, voice steady. I misjudged a hero. Every person we meet has a story. Let's hear it first. The lesson spread, a ripple of change. Carter's Harley still roared, carrying him down roads he'd earned the right to travel. His life, his sacrifices, reminded us all. Peace was bought with blood, and respect is owed to those who paid. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe to Black Echoes. Comment below. How will you honor the unseen heroes in your life? Life's deepest truth is this. We all have roads to travel, and every journey deserves respect.